guys, welcome back to my channel. This year is finally coming to an end. Where did December go? Was it a good year? I don't know, couldn't tell you. Haven't sat to think about anything because the year has just been flying by. But one thing is for sure, and that is that I did get a lot of reading done, so I figured it would be a really fun video to get on here and talk about my 5-star and 6-star reads. So those are like the best books that I have read in the year 2024, so hopefully you're able to find some book recommendations. And if you haven't read these books, what are you doing? Put them on your TBR immediately and thank me later. Also, if you haven't already, please subscribe. I would be forever thankful, so please subscribe if you haven't. Drop a like on this video, comment down below your favorite reads, and let's get into it. Now this video may not be a million years long because I feel like I'm kind of stingy with my 5 stars. Like if the book gets boring at any point, I do not give it a 5-star. Or if I feel like it was kind of like a cheap ending, I also will not give it a 5-star. So I feel like these books are my top tier best books ever. I am planning on doing a whole video where I'm tier ranking every single book that I read this year, so keep an eye out for that. But for this video specifically, it's only 5-star and 6-star reads, so let's get started. First and foremost, we have the Mindfck series. I'm sure you've heard about this. Every single review that I've stumbled about this book has been a positive review. I am convinced that every single person that has read it loves it. It's so fast-paced, so captivating, had me at the edge of my seat the entire 700 or 800 pages or whatever this is. If you haven't heard of this book, this is basically a dark romance, and it follows the story of our main character Lana, who is this girl, and she is trying to get revenge on people that have harmed her and her family in the past. This is basically going around and unaliving every single person involved in all her trauma and everything that she had to go through. So she's just going about her day, minding her business, until one day she gets approached and starts dating an FBI agent who just so happens to be the main lead in her case. It's so interesting seeing the romance develop while she's also trying to hide from him the fact that she's going around and unaliving these people. But I absolutely ate this up. This was so fast paced. It's technically 5 books and I read them as 5 individual books on my Kindle initially, but then I had to go and buy the physical copy so I can have it as a trophy on my shelf because I just absolutely ate it up. I literally finished this entire series in probably like 2 or 3 days, and I loved it. It was so good. It is a little graphic, it's a little gore, so definitely look up trigger warnings. Like even if you don't normally care about trigger warnings, I will look up trigger warnings on this one because it's definitely very descriptive and very dark, and there was parts of the book that I didn't like reading about. It just made my heart break. It crushed my soul a little bit to hear about it. But if that's not something that you think will negatively affect you, I definitely recommend because the story is just so good. I was at the edge of my seat. Literally could not sleep, did not eat, did not do anything until I finished this entire book, so definitely recommend. Next up we have another book, and that falls into the romance genre, and that is Twisted Games. I know you're gonna hate me. I know you're like, this cannot possibly be one of your top books of the year, but it is. I read it closer to the beginning of the year and I have just been obsessed with it ever since. I have read every single Ana Wang book that I can get my hands on in hopes of finding a book that will give me the same feeling as Twisted Games. First of all, it's book 2 of an interconnected standalone. I know a lot of people read book 1, which was Twisted Love, and absolutely hated it, and it was not my favorite, I'll tell you. But if you push through the series, it just gets so rewarding because it follows the story of 4 girl best friends, and they each get their book and they each get their own little romance. And book 2 just so happened to be my favorite. It follows the story of Bridget, who is a real life princess, and she's in the United States studying, getting her education. But after she's done her education, she's called to go back to her home country in Europe and basically prepare to take over the throne and be a queen. And there's so many expectations, obviously, when you are literally royalty, being the face of the country and being the leader of a country when you've just been a normal girl that's living in the United States, having friends, going out and enjoying her regular life. So that's quite the big transition. But where it gets interesting is that she gets romantically involved with her bodyguard, which, as you would imagine, heavily prohibited. So it's like a forbidden romance. They're just like sneaking around, and I ate it up. I loved it. I was literally dying to find out how it was gonna end because the nature of the conflict of this romance does not have a simple and easy resolution. So I was just like, what's gonna happen, how are they gonna figure this out, and I loved it. I loved it. It forever holds a special place in my heart. But I got super into romances, so the next book that I have is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This year was the year that I discovered Abby Jimenez, and I could not be more excited. I don't have the physical copy of it here in my bookshelf because it is at my boyfriend's apartment along with like literally half of my book collection, so unfortunately I don't have the physical little trophies to show you for every single one of these, but trust me, I have all of them. Basically, Part of Your World is book 1 of the Part of the World series, and I picked it up randomly because I heard really good things about books later on in the series, and I was like, well, no, it's kind of like interconnected. And one thing about me, I always read interconnected standalones as if they're like perfectly connected and part of a series, because I like to get the whole story. I don't want to be missing out on the development of other side characters, so I did start from the beginning. And when I tell you, I was shocked. There's a reading vlog of me reading this book. The way I was expecting the bare minimum from the book, and then it ended up giving me the world, is absolutely insane. It follows the story of our girl main character Alexis, and she is this big time doctor. She comes from this family of doctors and surgeons, and everybody knows her family name, and she lives in this city in a penthouse, very successful. So she's very well known, her family's very well known, she comes from money. And one day as she's driving back into town, her car literally dies in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this random small town. Yes, of course it would be a small town. And as you would expect, our main gay character comes to her rescue. He helps her tow her car and sends her back on her way. But before she goes, they stay up talking all night and flirting, and eventually they spend the night together. But then after that, she gets up and has to go back to her real life, back to her work, back to her family. Her whole life is in the city, and his whole life is in the small town. So their conflict was like super like two completely different worlds, completely different lives, but they are obviously so drawn to each other. And it was such a realistic conflict. That's what I loved so much about it. The main character was also so dreamy. He's such a sweetheart. He deserves the whole freaking world, but the whole time, again, I was just like, how is this gonna end? I did not see a world where this conflict gets resolved, because they just like seem like they don't really click into each other's lives. He's not really wanting to leave his small town. That's where his whole life is, all his friends and everything. And she's obviously very comfortable where she is, at her work, in her apartment, with her family, with her friends, and everything like that. So it is such a realistic conflict, and I loved every second of it. I annotated so much out of this book. If you see the physical copy of it, it's filled with tabs. Next up, we're moving to another one of my favorite series ever, and that is the Mile High series by Liz Tom Ford. And before you click off this video, I hated the first book. I DNF'd it. I feel like that's true for so many people, but if you just ignore the first book, pretend it doesn't exist, literally ignore it, and move on to the second one, I promise you it gets so much better. Because somehow on this list of my favorite books of the entire year, I have 2 separate books from that same series, which is absolutely insane. First up, we have book 2, which is The Right Move. This follows the story of Ryan Shea, and this is a sports romance. So he's a professional basketball player. However, he is so like introverted and doesn't trust people and very reserved and literally wants like his own personal space. He doesn't want media all up in his business and paparazzi and everything like that. He's like super closed off. And then you have our girl main character Indy, who is super bubbly, very outgoing, very social, like social butterfly to the max. And Indy is recently gotten out of like a really terrible breakup. Her ex cheated on her, and he is literally staying at their apartment, so she's like moving out and has nowhere to stay. And she just so happens to be best friends with Ryan's sister. So Ryan's sister is like, hey, you need to let my best friend stay with you. You're literally barely in that apartment. That apartment is massive. There's no one ever there. Like, let her stay with you. So this is like a brother and best friend kind of trope. It's also forced proximity. It's also roommate trope, and I just ate it up. He's one of my top book boyfriends like ever. I'm obsessed with their story. I love them as a couple. And also, one thing about the series, the found family, if you like found family trope, please read this series. Every book follows a different character and there's a group of people. I have just grown to love them. Like, in my mind, these are real people that live in Chicago, and they're just like going on about their day-to-day lives. Like, I know so much about them, like every single one of them. I've read all of their love stories and I'm obsessed. And then after this book, we have Caught Up, which is not quite a 5-star read for me, but it was still really good. This is a single dad nanny trope. if you're into that. There's also a little bit of an age gap because he's like 32 and she's 25 or something along those lines, so that's like really fun one as well. So the next book is the second 5-star book of the series, and that is Play Along. I recently read this, and as you can see, I absolutely devoured it. I loved it so much. This follows the story of Isaiah and Kennedy, and they work together. He is a professional baseball player. He is the younger brother of the guy that we meet in book 3. So already we've heard so much about this guy, and he's been obsessed with our girl main character for like the longest time. Like, we've read about it through all the other different books, and he's like constantly hitting on her, constantly wanting her attention. But she is a professional. She's like the doctor, medical examiner person that is like with their team. She's like a bad bitch. She takes her job super seriously, so she's not gonna get caught up like flirting with any of the players in the team, like, you know what I mean? But he's been shooting his shot literally the entire time, but it was mostly as a joke because Kennedy for the longest time has had a nice fat rock on her finger until about 10 months ago, when all of a sudden she stops. So these two coincidentally end up at the same place, which is Vegas, and they end up spending some time together, getting really drunk in Vegas, and they wake up the next morning and she's freaking out. She's like, I cannot believe I let this happen. We need to get this annulled as soon as we get back home. That's the first thing we do. However, for her to get involved with the players on the team, it's against the rules, and she's gonna lose her job. And she really needs to keep this job because she needs them to give a really good review for her interview for her dream job at the end of the season. So she cannot let that happen. So Isaiah offers for them to basically be fake married, fake dates, and pretend they're actually married in front of the big bosses so that she does not get fired. And I just absolutely love Isaiah. He's the most like golden retriever boyfriend ever. Kennedy has always thought of him as kind of a player, but we know from his POV that he's just been obsessed with her and has eyes only for her, and I just absolutely love it. I absolutely love a boy falls first romance, and like he falls harder also kind of romance, and she's more reserved, more like black cat energy. She's like not really very trusting and super scared to like escalate anything. So I absolutely love just seeing him throughout the whole book try to prove himself to her and make efforts to make it work. And I got so many cute quotes from this. The whole book is basically underlined. If you were to see my annotations for this, you would literally die. I just love it so much. So please give this a chance. And the next book of the series is coming out in April, so you already know I'm gonna be sat and ready to read. I don't even know who it's about yet, but I'll be ready for it. And then another series that I've been absolutely obsessed with this year has been the Natural series by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. I read that book super randomly on a whim on my Kindle one day and absolutely fell in love with it. If you're looking to understand the vibes of that book, it's basically like a YA Criminal Minds meets true crime. So you basically have this group of teenagers and they get chosen by the FBI because they have special sets of skills. So those skills can include things like being naturally good at profiling people. Some of them are really good at statistics and definitions and just like retaining information. One of them is basically like a living lie detector, so she can tell right away if people are lying about anything. So the FBI basically recruits all of these kids and puts them in what is called the Naturals program, which is a program for them to basically learn to enhance those skills so that they can later be used by the FBI to solve cold cases. It is super interesting. All these teenagers, not only do they have their own special abilities, think of like Spencer Reid if you've watched Criminal Minds, like they're all kind of like that, but they also have like such different personalities, so like the dynamics of everyone in the group is just so interesting. There's also a love triangle in this book, and I'm usually a big love triangle hater. I don't love triangles because I'm like a hopeless romantic, so I want them to like see each other and fall in love and never think of anyone else ever again. However, it is just like done so well because the two competing love interests are just like such different. One of them is like super fun and energetic and golden retriever, like super out there, super like funny kind of guy, and then the other one has a bunch of trauma. He's very much keeping to himself. He's very like quiet and reserved and like doesn't trust people, doesn't want to talk to people. So it's so interesting seeing the dynamics of all these teenagers that are in this group. And then of course you have all these cases that they're working on, and sometimes they work on cases that are somehow very closely tied to people that they know or their personal lives. So it is so interesting seeing those things mesh. I've absolutely loved it. I haven't finished the whole series yet, but I have heard only the best of things. I have heard that it only gets better with every single book, so I'm very excited to continue being in the world and learning more about each of the characters and seeing where it goes. I really hope you guys enjoyed. These are my favorite books of 2024. I cannot believe that I read so many books this year, and I cannot wait to see how many books I'm gonna read next year. I'm so excited for all the 5-star books that I'm gonna find and all the books that I'm gonna buy and add to my collection. Stuff like that just makes me so freaking happy and so excited. Comment down below either your top favorite book of the year or your top 5 or your top however many you want to share, because I'm always looking for books to add to my never-ending TBR, of course. Follow all my socials, Instagram, TikTok, and all of that. Everything is linked down below, and that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed. Drop a like on this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!